there's a debate goes on within the Playwork world, which about the definition of Playwork. And a lot of people define Playwork in very, very specific terms. It's defined in terms of what is called the 3 F's, the 3 frees, which is that it has to be freely chosen, it has to be free of charge, and the children have to be free to come and go as they please. That limits Playwork down pretty much to adventure playgrounds and not much else. I define Playwork in a much more broad sense, so broadly in fact that I feel play therapy would be almost an arm of Playwork, rather in the same way as social work. People know what social work is. It's a generic concept. There are psychiatric social workers and children's social workers and so on. And I tend to see Playwork in that sort of way. So I would see play therapy as one aspect of Playwork. So the material that I showed yesterday, I do see it as Playwork, but certainly while I've been here, I've been more and more made aware that it overlaps a lot with play therapy. All our students have to do a dissertation at the end of the year, of their 3rd year, a 10,000-word dissertation. And one of them, she did her dissertation concerning the children's use of the book corner. And what she was after finding out was, do the way the children use the book corner, does that affect the way they subsequently play? It's very interesting. I'm going to read you an observation she did while she was doing that study. So I had one child on my lap reading a digger's book, one child next to me reading The Gingerbread Man, and one boy facing me reading Old MacDonald Had a Farm. They were all reading to themselves, but each had some kind of contact with me, which seemed to be important to them. The little boy who was reading The Gingerbread Man changed his book and picked up The Hungry Caterpillar. I'm guessing everybody knows the story of The Hungry Caterpillar. He asked me to read it to him. The other 2 children put their books down and pointed to the book. I started to read the story. On the last page, I pointed to the beautiful butterfly and talked about the colours. The little boy who was sitting on my lap put the book away and reached for Spot's birthday party. But then I noticed something really magical. One little boy who was listening to the Hungry Caterpillar story was sitting very still, cupping his right hand and looking at it. I asked him what he was holding. He replied, a beautiful butterfly. I asked if I could see it. He then told me that I had one in my hand too. I followed his cue and cupped my hand in the same way. Oh yes, it's beautiful, I said. I asked him what we should do with our butterflies, and he told me that he was going to let his butterfly fly away outside. He ran off and came back a moment later wearing his coat and hat. He whispered in my ear, "It's in my pocket." I followed him outside. He reached into his pocket and slowly brought out his closed fist. He opened his hand, threw his hand upwards into the air, and laughed. I imitated his actions, and our butterflies flew away together. It was magic. So working with children, as I'm sure you know, can be magic. So the session is about children's play. It's about the impact of play on child development. It's about the potentially therapeutic role of play in that process. It's about play workers working in extreme adversity. It's about work with abandoned and abused children. And it's about a research project that we ran through the university that studied the impact of therapeutic play work on a specific group of those abandoned and abused children. So yesterday I showed some images of work that we were involved in Romania, which is working with abandoned children, children who'd been abandoned at birth. We worked with a group of 16 children, some of whom were fairly seriously disabled, all of whom looked as though they were disabled, but clearly once we started working with them, it became very quickly apparent that they hadn't been born disabled, not all of them. They were varying in ages. The youngest child was 9 months old. The oldest child was 12. They'd all, as far as we're aware, spent their whole lives tied in their cots. Some of them were HIV positive. When they were sick, they were treated with shared needles, which I actually saw that happen on one occasion. Which is obviously a very dangerous thing to happen. We were given a playroom a room anyway, in the hospital, which we used as a playroom. We developed as a playroom. It wouldn't bear much resemblance to any sort of playroom that people elsewhere in the world would recognise, but we filled it with the usual sorts of play materials, and we then we had to basically untie the children in the morning, feed them properly, change their nappies, bathe them properly, take them down to the playroom for the day, work with them during the day, and then at the end of the day take them back up to the hospital ward where they would be tied up again by the nurses as soon as we left. We employed, the charity that was running this project, White Rose Initiative, employed a woman, a Romanian woman who had grown up herself as an abandoned child, a woman called Edith Bus. She was brought to the UK and we trained her to go and work with the kids in Romania. And then after she'd been there for about 3 or 4 months, a colleague of mine, Sophie Webb, went over to work with her, and Sophie worked with her for about 4 months initially, and then again later in the same year, and I went over and worked for some of that period. So although the material I showed yesterday has the result that people keep coming up to me at the conference and saying, "Isn't that wonderful what you did?" I have to keep saying it wasn't me. It was a little bit of it was me, but mainly it was Edith and Sophie who achieved what they achieved. Now, what they achieved was a phenomenal change in the balance, the development of those children. So from all 16 children sitting, rocking in their cots, oblivious of the world around them, and just generally very, very disturbed children. In the space of 6 months, there were massive changes in the children, and I showed some evidence of that in the video footage yesterday. So changes to the extent of children developing symbolic play and that sort of thing, which normally would take the level that I showed it would take about 3 years, according to Piaget. So those sort of changes taking place very, very quickly indeed. And I've come to the conclusion overall that it's possible, by using an appropriate sort of play environment and working appropriately with the children, it's possible for them to develop, to recover their intellectual faculties and to recover their social skills, to recover even their physical makeup, but I'm less convinced that they recover their emotional equilibrium in the end, because I've had experiences that suggest that that is not as easy for the kids to recover.